Well, hello, folks. As you can see, I have Aristo here with me today. I screwed up yesterday because I fell asleep, and that's very unlike me, but I slept through the time that we were supposed to record. The topic that we're going to discuss today is why aren't changes happening? And as I said to Aristo just a minute or so ago, this is something that's on the minds of many people. We've been told that there's going to be a currency revaluation and other changes that are going to shift things into a paradigm of truth, perhaps. And yet, it seems like the Cabal still keeps delaying that, or something is delaying it. You know, whoever is responsible, I'm not sure. But Aristo, lots of people have this question, and this is something that I'd like you to address, and we'll see what kind of discussion follows.
All right. It is a very, very important question, but at the same time, it is a strange question because you look deeper into things, you go, what do you mean changes? You know, do you mean why isn't the world the way that I want it to be after millennia of conditioning and social engineering and who knows what, and just plain human nature? Why don't things just make themselves right? And I think the problem here, one of the problems is conceptual, okay? Because the word right, what does that even mean? You see, things can become right and people still won't be satisfied. Then that means they aren't really right. What does that even mean? Thing is, if it's not right within you, then you can have a paradise life on the outside and you still won't be satisfied. Many say that the earth started off as a paradise life, or you know, at least humans were much more harmonized. The golden age, golden ages have happened before, you know, or at least ages of general affluence or something, where you would say, okay, this is cool, this is okay. And maybe they lasted. Why did they degrade? Somebody was dissatisfied. Now, the thing is, if somebody is dissatisfied and they are determined enough, all it takes is persistence to change 10% of the population's orientation, and the rest just topples like dominoes. But,
I know that 10%, we've heard that a lot. And it seems to me like there's greater than 10% that are clamoring for change.
That's what Mark Passio, I was looking at some video of his, it's an interview with Max Igan, and he was saying, well, that's just a fallacy. I mean, it takes a hell of a lot more than 10% to change anything. It takes everybody, or close to everybody, a majority, to actually rise up.
I watched that same Mark Passio video, at least half of it, and turned it off. I mean, I just couldn't take anymore.
See, I disagree in the sense, but that, you know, well, the people, if you want to blame the psychopathic faction of humanity, the ones that really, you know, let's say everybody started out in hunter-gatherer societies or whatever, or agrarian societies, agricultural revolution, and it was basically villages and everybody was more or less equal in a sense. Then you had leaders, and eventually you had hierarchies develop. And then, you know, as the hierarchies developed, you had power structure, and power structure is something some people covet. And if they covet it enough, then they will work for it. Mark Passio says, oh, these people work together as a unit. You know, personally, I don't think they do.
I don't think they do. I think their unanimity is disintegrating.
Exactly. I mean, I believe that they are very disciplined, and basically they push themselves, and there is a fanatical element. And of course, you know, because they don't have anything else. But the thing is, my point is that these people eventually, even if they're less than 10%, they created situations where they either became 10% or, you know, influenced 10%. And then things happen. And it took a long time. It may have taken thousands of years for this to happen, or it may have taken a short time. The point is, society back then was more or less primitive in nature, homogeneous, or even just, you know, you didn't have so much chaos at
And
that
you didn't
point.
have the technology to know what's going on in other parts of the world instantaneously, basically.
That too, but you know, we didn't wake up to this situation yesterday. We woke up to this situation, you know, way before there was any technology. And that's my point. Is like right now we assume we are just people assume, I assumed that okay, we're 10%. Let's wake up 10%, and if we can wake up 10%, things will change. However, the other 10% is still operating. It's not dead, it hasn't stopped. So we don't have the same conditions. The only thing that waking up 10% is going to do is bring us to a stalemate, a perpetual stalemate. And if you notice, it's almost where we are. Of course, the establishment keeps saying that, we won, and they try to insinuate, and other people, alleged truthers or alternative types, say, well, they're so smart and they planned all of this, and it's all going right according to plan. Yeah, but the plan keeps shifting. You can see that. Some things that are pushed, then they're drawn back. It's still experimental. They're still not sure. So they have to, you know, they're not pushing the end game. They have a basic template, of course. Anybody can see that. What I'm saying is things anybody can see if you just observe the situation and think a little deeper and discern. But, you know, we are not in a position of a radical takeover. We're not being forced to the ground with chips being planted in, or smart dust blown in our face, or even these smart meters rolled out. They keep saying, we'll do this, and very likely that is the plan. However, it has to be done very, very slowly with constant observation, and this is why surveillance is going on. It's not going on because you're a threat, or I'm a threat, or any individual is a threat, with a few exceptions that they see, people who spark grassroots movements, for example. It's not going on because of that. It's going on for statistical reasons, statistical data mining. And then there are various experiments, because these people are, I agree with Mark Passio in this, that they are occultists. They're a priesthood. This is how they think. However, your sense of cabal, in my honest opinion, is too small. This has gone on for so many thousands of years that they've covered the bases.
Well, I think it's even beyond just human. I mean, I think
exactly. And if that's the case,
other beings involved that we would not consider human, extraterrestrial or whatever you want to call them. There's different labels, but there's other races than the human race involved.
Personally, I believe it's a non-corporeal element. I don't believe it's a three-dimensional, physical, biological dynamic going on. And I do believe that this non-corporeal element is parasitic. However, it is an element that is probably meant to be symbiotic. You see, if it was just some kind of parasite that's meant to be destroyed and eliminated, or a mistake, then it's not that difficult for the planet, the system, life, events, God, whatever, to deal with it that way. Eliminating and destroying is easy. However, transforming, metamorphosizing, and assimilating is not easy, especially when you do this with respect to the freedom of everything. And harmony and all of that. Slavery is easy.
If it was truly the freedom of everything, I'd be in total agreement. The thing is, the Cabal, or whatever you want to call that element, doesn't allow freedom. Freedom is a threat to them.
Of course it is. And it's a threat because they are afraid. But what they are afraid of, in my honest opinion, according to my experience, explorations, whatever you want to call it, is what we're afraid of. We are afraid of the same thing. It's just that we have different mechanisms of addressing that fear. Most normal people who are not psychopathic have mechanisms of denial that allow them to sustain so-called everyday life within certain parameters. As long as you're not being tortured, as long as you have food on the table, as long as if you're not completely suffering, you know, life can be meaningful to the point that generation after generation after generation, it will go on just like it does in the animal kingdom. However, if it becomes too strained, then it becomes meaningless and things accelerate, because the necessity for change is what brings about change. There is an inertial element in most of humanity. That, in my opinion, is as it should be, because most of humanity are sustainers. They're not, you know, out of the bulk of humanity, you have creators coming, and creators are usually the ones who are dissatisfied with the status quo, or who are so in tune with certain ideals that they cannot help but channel them or represent them as avatars of those ideals. Be those ideals aesthetic, intellectual, ideals of power, ideals of liberation, ideals of anything. Basically, aspects of divinity, you might say, aspects of spirit. There are some people who are like that. There are many different kinds. And I know it's politically incorrect, but the point is that most people, and when I say most people, I mean that people who essentially are satisfied with very little from within. However, these people are really not satisfied as much as they say, because when life becomes difficult, we would rather go into something simpler, even if we have to compromise a whole bunch of shit. The controllers, so to speak, use problem, reaction, solution scenarios just for that. They say, well, it could be worse, so you give your freedom and you be our slaves, or else you'll be dead or suffering or something far worse. So, in order to avoid the really bad scenario, we can have the not so bad scenario, but completely not good either. And then we'll shift that, we'll normalize it, make it worse, but then it'll be better than the far worse. Sometimes things get so, in order to push you into an even more worse scenario, they'll make up a really far worse scenario. And if you really start thinking, you go, that's unsustainable. I mean, there are some methods, or not methods, but scenarios of evil or, bad scenarios that are unsustainable.
Some parts of the world, they're existing right now and have been for some time.
Yes, but you have to shift from one to the other, from one to the other. They are unsustainable globally. I'm talking about the fate of humanity here. You cannot, because the thing is, they can do it in some parts of the world, and that's the sin of the Western world, and that's what many third world people say, and that's what the psychopaths instigate in them. They instigate a hatred, saying, all of your suffering was there, so all these Westerners or civilized type or industrialized countries can have a good time, can be affluent. They were affluent on our backs. You have Northern Europe, you have North America, their climates are not as wealthy, especially Europe. I mean, it's not as rich as Africa, as South America, as Southeast Asia, South Asia. These places are all suffering because in order for their natural resources to go to an affluent part of the world. This is a setup, of course. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, when the Europeans were in a more barbaric state, when they were enslaved to the Roman Empire, when before, they were just warring villages or whatever, no matter how deep a philosophy they had, they didn't compare to the civilizations of India, Southeast Asia, some of them in Africa, South America, those other civilizations many of them were basically totalitarian. And all of them were totalitarian, but many of them caused a lot of suffering in the underclass. And from an occult perspective, you might say that their up was the other person's down, the other side of the planet's downside. It was like this, and now it's like this. Maybe a karmic equalization is going on. The point is that right now, the so-called 10% are really not the 10% because they are not in a vacuum. This only applies when everything else is status quo. But when you have a psychopathic 10% that's gung-ho, fanatical, constantly doing experiments, constantly pushing for an agenda, unstoppable in their own eyes, and even in the eyes of the sheeple, or the sheep, or the people who are basically asleep. But the point is that this whole context of asleep, we're all asleep, all of us, but we're not sleeping peaceful sleep. We're sleeping nightmares. And these nightmares are there because they represent
that literally.
Exactly, yeah. But nightmares are necessary to cleanse the psyche. And the collective psyche has to be cleansed because whatever you say about suffering being unsustainable, and it is unsustainable, and there is too much, even if there's a little, it's too much. The point is that there's a malignancy in human existence that represents a malignancy in the rest of existence. We don't see it in the rest of existence as much because it's spread out everywhere, and it's spread out through time as well as space. you would see its effects over millions of years or through an evolutionary cycles and stuff like that. But with humans, it's all become condensed into an awareness that is both self-conscious and conscious of its environment in a way that it actively alters it. So humans are a catalyst for change. They are the solution. But again, we look at things.
And they are also the problem.
Well, in order to be the solution, they have to embody the problem. So we're looking at changes on a very, very small scale here. And I know you don't like the argument that, okay, you know, this is going to happen, but it's going to happen over a long period of time. I agree, yes, but what I'm trying to say now is that the long period of time is accelerating. It's becoming shorter and shorter and shorter. It's like the ninth wave phenomenon, where, yeah, in previous cycles, it took a long period of time to go through golden age to iron age, to golden age to iron age, or whatever, but we're spiraling to the point that the golden ages are getting less golden and the iron ages are being, you know, overcome more, and they're becoming less, you know, parts of the world are being disrupted, other parts are rising, other parts are falling. You know, there's a whole bunch going on, and none of it really resolves anything. It is chaos. And I want to say that it is just as much chaos for the psychopathic types who are controlling, so to speak, as it is for everybody else. This is universal. If these psychopaths have to experiment and reevaluate and re-alter plans and push back and push forward, see, this is why observing the situation is important. That's how you get yourself out of the so-called matrix. You know, discernment, observation, all of these things are cultivated by practicing them. Even if you don't know how to practice them, you move, they are natural dynamics of human consciousness. So if you just move to observe and evaluate and you're not afraid to judge, you know, why do we have this guilt trip against judging? Of course, you know, if you're constantly condemning and doing nothing else and you're not evaluating. But if you're assessing a situation and saying, well, this is this and this seems like that, and let's see how it develops. So you have a certain flexibility, you know, even if you judge it in a certain way 1 minute, it may alter. But you can't remain neutral on the fence all the time. You know, if you're going to act, and you've said this yourself, you need to establish a stance of where you're going to go. So why haven't there been the changes we see? Well, first of all, most human beings are not as awake as they think they are.
And it's interesting, even living with a bunch of elderly people, where I do, and having elevator conversations primarily, I'm amazed at how many people are, at least in brief moments of conversation, seem to be somewhat aware of some of the issues that we're facing as humanity. You know, they're not.
If you really talk to old timers from the 40s, you know, whatever, and we had, people were always aware of that. In the 30s, they would talk about these things, you know, the government and the abuses of government and all kinds of things, you know. They didn't have big pharma back then, but they would talk about a whole bunch. Then they'd have these other things where they'd be completely in the dark, like racism, sexism. You know, these are brought to the forefront now. But the old political discussions of human oppression, class oppression, you know, class oppression is distorted and always has been, you know, by tyrants and establishments and stuff. Either it's been persecuted or it's been warped into some false revolution or ideology zone. But we have all of this experience and we have the information age to let us know, and that is what is being distorted. Now, the very observation, again, that it's being distorted means that it's a threat. And threats are something we can take advantage of, threats to the establishment. There are nuances, in other words, that people haven't picked up on. It's not enough to just be aware of these things. I mean, to not be a complete zombie. It's not enough to be falling and working with the psychopaths or being a shill. I'm not a shill. I'm not, you know, hey. The fact is, as John Rappaport mentioned, or somebody did, I can't remember, that you have Max Igan even said, you know, you have a cell phone. You know, why do you have a cell phone and you're bitching about Wi-Fi and all this electromagnetic radiation? You know, you use your smartphone. You're on the internet. You're on Facebook, for Christ's sakes, you know. Why don't you go on another medium or forum? You're bitching about surveillance. You're on Facebook. You want to use all these things that they tell us, you know, you're bitching about poisons. You eat junk food, you know. all of these things. And then there's a lot of things that are confusing. I mean, people are getting caught up in something obvious to argue about. So there's no controversy. So you argue about the flat earth. I mean, for me, that's not even an issue. That's just,
No, to me,
put it
that's
over there, you know. Or the interesting thing is, I mentioned some about pedophiles, and it's like, if you killed every last pedophile in the world, no, there's going to be, normal are going to start getting corrupted in a way. They're going to become psychopathic and manipulate, victimize. It's like, just killing people is not the solution. You don't let them go either. The solution is going to the root of the problem. No, with all of these other social things, like incarceration and everything, and yes, but look at the abuse. In prisons, you have many innocent people. I mean, and it's become an institution of slave labor. And prisons are what sustain organized crime. It's all, and all in the name of what? Somebody's revenge of the victims. And the victims are being victimized anyways by people who never go to prison or whatever, who run the prisons. So it is all a distorted thing, and by a minority that is sustaining a traumatized quasi-minority, you know, because you have a pyramid thing, and then, you know, they say, oh, here are the bankers, and here are the generals, and no, here are the fucking psychopaths, and over here are all the criminals, all the people that are so traumatized they have to destroy. So they're like rabid dogs, and they're point and shoot, you know, the warlords, the dictators, the you know, people who actually cause the suffering, those people in the police forces. You know, this is a general mass of humanity that's gone insane, and it's being joined, it's being sucked up from the bottom, more and more people. And so they're trying to find a way to create a sustained and controlled insanity. So those who will not go insane, you know, get screwed up in a different way. They're either dead or mutated. You know, right now they're working on human DNA. They're replicating human DNA so they can infuse it to the human genome and make us better. And then we're screwed, but not really.
Make us compliant. I wouldn't say better.
Well, beyond compliant, I mean, they got robots for compliancy. I mean, this is a psychopath, a little kid who just pulls wings off of flies, you know, at the basis. So the thing is, our values in society, many of them have been either socially engineered or socially corrupted. So we go, well, how can this change then? Because the thing is, if you really want to think of change, you have to address your fear of change. You have to address because you say many times, that's impossible. This is impossible. It can't happen. And yeah, if you think that's impossible and you promote that logic, then it's a box. And outside the box, you can't think outside it. You have your boundaries of what's possible. The thing is, it's not just to claim it's possible like many do. It's to explore what would it take for it to be possible. And yes, you say, well, it takes divine intervention. Yeah, but that's not good enough for human beings to actually creatively grasp and to use, to capitalize off of. You need something more specific so people can actually focus on it, at least intention-wise. So what is divine intervention in all of these things? Now, the thing is that people feel stress and they don't know how to deal with it. They feel existential stress. The existential stress is there all the time. This is why there is denial. We go around, you know, I noticed in past decades, people did not want change. They wanted things to remain the same. They kept wailing about the poor and unfortunates in Asia, Africa, whatever, but they didn't want change. They weren't going to go out of their way. So what does the poor and fortunate in Africa or whatever do? They pray. They have a will. They have a force of their consciousness. And all of that is diverted by the psychopathic class for their own ends, because they're taking advantage of not our complacency, but our fear to act, our fear to think, our fear to do whatever. And they're closing the walls of fear around us constantly because we are afraid to express now. Political correctness is more a jailer than any physical thought. People are afraid. They're constantly apologizing for what they're saying and what they're thinking. Can you imagine? You know, where is freedom of thought when you have to apologize? When you have to go up and the media is constantly showing stupid examples of idiot celebrities that have to apologize for doing something, like cracking a joke for something or wearing a certain outfit. You know, where is the freedom of dress? What is this thing called cultural appropriation? misappropriation. What rule says that, well, in one part of the world they dress like this, but I can't do that. I can't put on those clothes. I can't put that hairstyle on. I can't do anything, because they're offended. That isn't even real. That's just, you give us, I'm sorry, you give a number of people with a inferiority complex the excuse to lord it over everybody else under the name of some media promoted concept. And they do. They need to, and this is where human beings are turned petty. They're turned petty on purpose. And petty on purpose is one of the reasons you don't see things changing. Now, things do not have to become ultra revolutionary for a momentum to start building. Because what we need right now, in my honest opinion, what we can hope for is to sustain a stalemate. The stalemate, however, is going to stress humanity, all of humanity, the psychos, us, even those who are divinely inspired and can actually do something or can perform. Everybody's going to be stressed. It's like a piezoelectric crystal. You have a crystal, a quartz crystal. If you press it mechanically, it creates an electric field. This is what, or if you put an electric field, it starts vibrating. Now this field, and that's why people feel empowered or energized by crystals. And again, there's a whole bunch of ridicule. Oh, a crystal new ager. I'm just giving an example here that there is a certain science, although it's constantly ridiculed, that quartz crystals, at least, and every mineral is a dielectric that amplifies the body's natural field and will feed back into the body, and that has beneficial effects. It's not rocket science. It's no big deal. It's not a miracle. It's not even spiritual. It's natural. So we have been threatened like a little kid in the playground with ridicule and bullying to act and react a certain way. And it's like the majority of humans aren't even aware of that or don't want to face that. It's too much.
Yeah, by the way, we are approaching the half-hour mark in a couple more minutes. Yeah.
Okay. As usual, I'm not giving you a list of things.
Right.
I mean, I'm not the type of person that can do a video, 5 ways we don't, allow changes to happen, I mean, that's just, for me, it's like, look, I'm sorry, people don't like to think, they want things laid out easy. You see, that's when changes become impossible. We are spoiled, informationally spoiled. Somebody once said, when information is too accessible, people consume more of it and contemplate less. So essentially, information is thrown at us, and all we do is act like the birdies with their mouths open, and the mother bird, just vomits stuff inside instead of learning to digest it, instead of processing it, instead of doing something with it. So of course things aren't changing, and people want specific things. Yes, but you're going back to that. You're going back to a regurgitated solution. We don't have any. Okay, that's it. The whole point is, for me, is there are people in the world who are, let's say, meditating or mystically inclined, and people, shamans. There are these people. They are in out of the way places. They are in towns. They are in the third world. They are in this world. In the civilized countries, they exist and they are occult empowered. However, they are also aware that you cannot just flick a switch and change things, because all you'll do is band-aid the situation at best. You will create another, like the myth of Atlantis, where everything looked good, but in the end, the continent itself blew up, because it couldn't sustain what people were denying. Nature herself reacted, and this is what they're threatening us, and I'm saying, look, the psychopaths are the ones that are destroying nature. They're the ones, look at the skies, who's doing that? And what is that? And look at the oceans. Come on, don't tell me fishing has taken all the poisons have taken the fish out of the oceans. Poisons are destroying, all of our soils are way less nutritious than they used to be. And yet they think that they can go in little isolated spots or some other planet. They're escapists. And they're idiots because of that, and they don't realize it because they have a very high IQ, but they're the ones who brainwashed us into thinking that all that matters is a high IQ. Emotional intelligence, nada. Social intelligence, nada. Spiritual intelligence, nada. Zombies. IQ, that's it. And so what is their God? Artificial intelligence. The intelligence, the divinity that they want to be the creators of divinity, not just gods, but the creators of God. So it's not just arrogance. It's the ultimate inferiority complex that needs to prove itself. So, you know, I don't even believe in the arrogance thing. I mean, arrogance is just healthy self-esteem. You have self-respect, okay? You don't have to slam the other person. Everything has been turned around already. We're constantly saying, well, we have to be careful because they will turn our values upside down. And we know our values have been turned upside down for the last 10,000 years. Most of us have an inkling of grasping our values when we're infants, you know, and as we grow up, it's pounded out of us all along the way, and we're trying to hold on to something. Yeah, we're confused, but the point is, we're not gone. We're not out of the works yet. So the world isn't changing because it's not ready to change. And by that, I mean, it's not somebody out there holding us back. It's us holding us back for a reason. Keep the tension. The tension is something, you know, in Indian mysticism, there is a state called spanda, which is a state of extended, it's like a cord being pulled to the breaking point, but not breaking. And that's when you can plug it and it makes music. It's pulled and it's ready, and that's where creation happens. You don't destroy and you don't go back into the void of nothingness or whatever potential. You create a state of tension. And this tension is where mobility can occur. It's not a bad thing. But at this point, we are desperate, but we don't need to be problem reaction solutionized. The changes that we seek will happen as we mature through the tension. And you may say, oh, humanity can't take this. It can and it will, because the tension is until it stresses everybody, and nobody can deny, because you can't just have a bunch of the so-called elite faction living in their own fucking daydream and everybody else in hell. That ain't gonna work. So the tension is gonna build and build until they finally feel the heat, and they're feeling the heat, and we're feeling the heat, and the animals and the plants and the whole world is feeling the heat, and that heat is a transformational one. It's not a good thing. But the thing is, we can open up possibilities of goodness if we empower ourselves. Intend to do this. Make this your priority. Self-empowerment means freedom. Freedom comes from within. You know, these ideals, they need to be practiced in a way where we haven't been enslaved yet. We're not completely enslaved. Where am I free? Work from there and face every fear you have as an energy and not as a storyline like somebody else wants to create. There's many, many reasons why things are not changing as most want them to be. But the main thing I want to say is that perhaps we are on the right path and that we are not as awake as we think we are. Otherwise, we would have seen it. Now, there are many people who believe we are on the right path, but where is the empowerment? Where is the circulation? Where is the inspiration? You see, it's not a passive state, in my opinion. So you can always find reasons why things aren't changing, but things will begin to change when you look within in a non-condemning manner and judge in a way that's discerning, loving, and empowering. Thank you for sticking with me through this rant. That's all I got to say today.
Okay, thank you, Aristo. On that note, we'll say goodbye and namaste to everyone.
Namaste, everyone.